All right. Can someone give me a thumbs up when they can see those slides? Connecting. Okay. Perfect. All right. So thank you again for joining us. This call was organized as a part of what we are calling the Food Rescue and Composting Program. So this new program came to be here at DEQ underneath this climate pollution reduction grant that DEQ got from EPA. This money was a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, if you've heard of that. And it is allowing DEQ to focus on climate pollution reduction in two ways. We actually received two grants as a state. One of them is a coalition grant focused on Atlantic conservation, which is working with those other states up there, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Maryland. And then the project that this program is housed under is a part of this Priority Methane Reduction Project grant. And so our food waste project is just one component of a broader project and a broader effort in Virginia to reduce methane. Food waste, when it's added to the landfill, creates methane gas. And so this project, the goal, the overarching goal is that we will divert food waste from the landfill, and that will be used in a variety of different ways, which I will discuss a little bit as we get more into the program. So underneath the food rescue and composting subaward program is kind of what we came out of with under this climate pollution reduction grant. So that is where our efforts are focused. Most of the money for our program is going directly to competitive subawards, which are available to colleges, universities, and state agencies in Virginia. So many of you on the call are affiliated with one of those groups. And so approximately 8.8 million will fund 15 to 20 competitive 3-year subawards. And so I'll go over the timeline in just a second, but our goal with this program is that we will fund lots of different projects that tackle food waste prevention, food rescue, and composting on college and university campuses and at state agencies. And so the goal of these calls essentially was to bring together lots of people in Virginia who are already doing lots of good work in all of these different areas. And so we have a call dedicated to composting, which is today's call, and then we'll have 2 more calls dedicated to the other subject areas. I'll put the dates up at the end. And if you didn't get calendar invites for those already and you would like to, you can just let me know. But the goal is that these calls can be a peer sharing session. Some of the people on this call may have filled out a survey for our office to give us more information about what you are already doing in the food waste space. And that information was really helpful in terms of figuring out what the barriers are to expanding these programs on campus. But we also learned that lots of people are already doing lots of great things in Virginia. And so we wanted to give you all an opportunity to create a peer network and share with each other so that no one has to build a program from total scratch. So all that to say, all of the programs that we fund under the subaward program will need to follow the guidance of the wasted food scale. And so we want to ensure that all of the programs we fund are not just immediately jumping to one realm of this little scale. So composting is great, but we also want to know that you have a food rescue program in place or a food waste prevention effort in place. So working from the top down, we would like food to feed people, and we want to reduce the overall amount of food waste that's being created. And so thinking about different ways that you can interact with the food that is on your campuses, and trying to reduce waste and get food to feed people as often as possible, and then ultimately diverting it from the landfill whenever you need to, is our overall goal. So that's kind of just a framing that we wanted to show in terms of the wasted food scale and how we designed this program. Sorry, my slides weren't moving. To get more into the actual timeline for when this funding will be available, our goal is to launch the subaward program this coming September. And then once we launch the application, it will be open for 2 months. And so we're thinking that we'll launch the application in mid-September, and then the application will be closed in mid-November. And then once the application period is over, we will review those documents internally, and we'll select our subawardees and notify you all whether or not your project has been awarded by early 2026. And then our goal is that the money will be available to you all in late spring to early summer of 2026, that you all could start implementing your projects. And then my last shout out is just for our other peer sharing calls that we have coming up. If you all put this information in the chat as well, but if you wanted to attend one of these calls and you didn't get a calendar invite from me yet, just let me know and I'll be more than happy to send those your way. I'll again save any questions for the end. So if anyone has any questions about the programs or any questions based on any of the presentations we're about to hear, we'll save those for the end and I'll stop the recording before we get into discussion. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I'm going to pass it over to our first presenter from the University of Richmond.
Awesome. Thank you, Sydney. I appreciate it. Don't use Teams too much, so forgive me if the screen shared doesn't go right on the first try. Yeah, you're still in my notes. Okay, cool. No notes.
You might want to, sorry to interrupt. You might want to, we can see some of your messages on the side. If you want to make your screen bigger, then we should be able to just see your, yeah, perfect.
I got you. Okay, we're doing this with no notes, so bear with me. All right, so my name is David Donaldson. I'm from the University of Richmond. I work with Rethink Waste. I'm going to share a little bit with you about what we are doing here at UR. We've had a pre-consumer collection program for quite some time, but our post-consumer program came along with COVID. So I guess you could say this is something good that came out of COVID. But like a lot of universities, we had moved over to all takeout, and a lot of the single-use stuff that we were already using was compostable. The students saw that our landfill bins were filling up with all these compostable items, and they didn't like that. So they went and they said, hey, we need to have a post-consumer compost program. And that is kind of where we start with all the slides I'm going to share with you. And that puts us at about November of 2020 in the timeline. So who is Rethink Waste? Just quickly, I want to share with you who we are. So we're part of Custodial and Environmental Services, and we're kind of an amalgam of waste management from facilities and outreach and education from the Office for Sustainability. Smash those together and you get Rethink Waste. So you can see there, we also have the traditional custodial stuff over there, but then Rethink Waste branches off into two sides as well. We've got our operations team, and we've got our operations team, who's led by Mauricio Lopez. And if you've had the fortune of meeting him, he is pretty much the best. And I think it's really important to have a really good person running your operations, and he is that. And then our Rethink Waste representatives, which is mostly student run, but that's headed up by Jacob Sakira. He's out on parental leave right now, so he's not able to share anything with us, but we've been able to put together a really good team, and I think that's really step one. So what does Rethink Waste do? Well, we do everything related to waste on campus. So everything from our physical waste infrastructure, inside and outside, and teaching various groups about how to interact with that waste infrastructure, what goes where, why, and that kind of thing. And also helping them understand, like I said, the why we're doing what we're doing, because we're also responsible for, we'll say, waste literacy on campus, in addition to making sure the trash cans and the dumpsters look good. Like I said, we'd like to tell people why. So why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because a ton of what makes up our landfill waste could actually be diverted. And a lot of it is food and a lot of it is compostable. And we need them to understand why. We need them to understand why, because it's one of the largest contributors of methane emissions when this stuff goes to the landfill. So we want to mitigate that where we can. And we teach people about, what can go in each waste stream. On campus, we have a great partner with Nope. I think Ryan's on this call, so thank you, Ryan. We wouldn't have been able to do a lot of this without having that partnership with Nope. So we also helped the dining hall understand that they need to make sure that all of any food scraps that come back need to be composted. And they've developed, with our help, a really good operation where Everything that goes back in the dish return is run through a pulper and it's all composted. Where Nope, again, thanks Ryan, will come and pick all of that up from our dining hall. We have made some efforts in reducing the amount of food wasted, thanks to Lean Path and all the good work that our chef and his team are doing. Um, and they also have some outreach that they do to share some of that food that they can with some local partners. But I think there's opportunity to do more, both with the dining hall and in our retail dining operations. And to date, since 2020, November of 2020, we've been able to divert over 1 million pounds of organic waste for compost. And pretty proud of that number. And I hope we've got 1 million more to go, and maybe we can get there a little faster the next time. So we also started a residential composting pilot back in the fall of 2022 that was student driven as well. A lot of what we do is student driven. Our students are a great resource and they have so many ideas and they haven't been crushed by the world yet. So they're all very idealistic and you never know what's going to be possible. So I always listen to these ideas that they come with. And this one was very successful. We got some really good participation. The first go, even more participation when we did it for round 2. You can see here, this was the beginning of our program. So we have apartment style housing there at the bottom of the map. And those students are not required to have meal plans. So they have kitchens, they're doing a lot more cooking. So that seemed the logical place to start with our residential program. That's what our setup looked like. It was very small, but it did the job for the pilot. But it was a lot for Mauricio's team. I mentioned Mauricio, he's very patient. So what he would have to do is him and his team would pick up these full containers, take them to the dining hall where we already had a collection point, take the empty container from the dining hall back to where these circles are, and every week would have to make that rotation so that when Nope came to campus, everything was there at the dining hall to be picked up. Now, over time, like I said, we had a lot of success. We got approval just to make this part of apartment living on campus and approval for the funds to make sure that we had the equipment to hand out to anybody who wanted to participate. So now, my slides are out of order. Okay, but we've also learned that convenience is essential. If you don't make it easy, they're not going to participate. But if you do make it easy, they will participate, and for the most part, do a pretty good job of it. And since then, we've been able to add collection points at all of the dumpster enclosures through our apartment housing and one in a more traditional residence area. That's all the dark blue rectangles. The red rectangles are where we have collection points for retail dining and other things. So what we do with all of our traditional residence halls on the side of campus where the majority of the red rectangles are, is we encourage those students to use those pickup points because they don't have kitchens, they don't have a ton of organic waste, but they may still want to participate. So we want to make sure that we give everybody an opportunity to do so. We've also been pretty active in Campus Race to Zero Waste. In fact, we use all of these composting and compost collection that we've been doing, including with our stadium and our arena, as kind of a focal point of what we're doing with Campus Race to Zero Waste. So this is our first attempt. It's pretty good. Second attempt here. We had some major improvements this year. We included athletics, which is going to be a focus for us this coming school year, is working with concessions and seeing if we can do even better with all the waste that's being generated at our sporting events. We spent a little more time strategizing in 2024, and we were able to divert 98% of the waste from that particular game. A lot of that success has to do with the fact that our concessions team has made a lot of improvements in sourcing single-use compostable items. And because there is a little less sorting that has to happen, it makes it a lot easier to do the work that we need to do. So we spent a little more time on it. We ended up winning it again, winning the football challenge as well. So we figured out how to work it at the stadium with the composting addition. Now our stadium is 3 streams permanently. So hopefully this season, we're going to see a lot more diversion coming from our football games. And then again, with basketball, I think we've kind of figured out how to do basketball. So just want to see what more there is to do. Where is that gap between the diversion that we are getting and all diverted? So trying to figure out how we can close that gap. But we're also out there doing other things. You know, we're supporting events. We are trying to get people to sort of rethink how they do their events. We're working with the Office for Sustainability on developing a waste conscious event guide so that people can have these tips kind of in their back pocket whenever they're putting on an event. In addition to the compostable cutlery, making sure your bins are there, your signage is right, encouraging people to communicate in advance. Everything's going to be compostable, or bring your own drink, water bottle, bring your own fork. You know, all that stuff can be communicated in advance. It can be communicated at the event and during the event so that people don't forget, because still, you know, while this is just assumed information for us, not everybody lives in this world, and we have to understand that not everybody knows what we know when it comes to waste and waste practices. We like to show up at events whenever we can to make sure we're diverting as much of the compostable material as possible, and our students are always happy to step up and do that. Something else we've been doing is getting out into local schools. Anybody that'll have us, we're happy to go and talk to anybody of any age about trash all day long. This was at Albert Hill Middle School in the city of Richmond, their Earth Day celebration, where we were talking to their students about composting, and they participated in an eco brick project as well that we have going on. But they were really excited. It was really heartening to hear how many of them are already composting at home. So because kids that age know everything, they were like, we don't need to listen to you because we already know about this. And I think something that's been very impactful is getting our students out to the facilities where our waste goes. For a lot of them, it's really abstract, and until you see it in person, you don't really understand what's happening. It also helps combat the talk about how everything goes to the same place. If you can actually show people where the waste goes, you can show them that it doesn't actually all go to the same place. So that's big there. And then this was a food waste demonstration that we were doing just to show people how much food they're actually wasting. And hopefully we did that and got some people to rethink how much food they were taking when they got their lunch that particular day. Something else that I've been really excited about is we've been working a lot with faculty and students on their research. And this one in particular, this student and this faculty member were looking at, as you can see there, the examination of predictive factors and underlying campus composting behavior. So it was developed to understand perceived norms and how those influence behavior. So many people believe that their peers didn't compost as much as they actually did, and therefore they also did not participate in sorting their waste. And they also found that growing up in a household that composts will lead to future adoption of correct composting behavior. That kind of makes sense there. And I mean, that's all I really wanted to share, but we have a lot going on here with compost, and we've been doing it for about 4.5 years now. And I think we're ready to kind of take what we're doing to the next level, and see how we can infuse composting and thinking about separating waste into the rest of the campus that we haven't touched yet. So if anyone's interested, the pink QR code is our Instagram, the green one's my email, and the purple one is our website. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. We will save any questions to the end, but I did want to encourage people, if they have questions throughout, feel free to throw them in the chat. And then for our next presentation, I will throw it over to our team of presenters from George Mason University.
All right, I will share my screen. Okay. Hold on. Where's the present mode? Oh, there we go. All right. So, yeah, so we're from George Mason University. My name is Amber Saxton, and Colleen Regan is also on the call. We work in facilities and campus operations. Um, and just as a quick primer, George Mason has about over 39,000 students and over about 8,000 faculty and staff. This is just to kind of get an idea of like the scale of composting at Mason. I will say that despite our numbers, we do have a smaller residential population comparatively. It's only 6,000 residential students on average and about 1.2 million meal swipes in the dining halls per year. And then we have some kind of unique um, sustainability centers. So, like the Smithsonian Mason School of Conservation, Institute for Sustainable Earth, and those types of things. And then we also were the first school in Virginia to get HE Stars Gold, which we're very excited to have maintained since 2014. Um, and then our office, the one that Colleen and I work in, is the University Sustainability Office. And basically, we work with a lot of partners on campus to try to develop solutions to operational issues. And composting is one of those. So, our foundational partnerships dealing with compost, especially facilities management, is the key one, and especially the recycling manager there. Auxiliary and business services, so that would deal with the dining contracts and things like that, purchasing, dining, transportation, HRL, athletics are all other key partners. Other stakeholders that we have, really sought to engage on composting is purchasers and governance, like student government, faculty, staff. And then we have worked with other groups like ITS or our Patriot Green Fund Committee, to kind of support projects that enhance our outcomes. And then I will say that one of our most important partnerships on campus, no matter what we're doing as an office, is our student involvement. So we have about 10 to 12 interns, 2 to 4 fellows per year for our office, and we have about 3,000 volunteers per year. A lot of those folks work in our greenhouse and gardens program, so they get experiential learning. But one of those sites, as you can see here, is our composting pile in our innovation food forest, and that's one of our sites for backyard composting, so it's not industrial. But other initiatives that deal with composting include like Weigh the Waste or, just other zero waste reuse kind of affiliated things that help with compost. So this presentation is we're just going to go over a quick overview of composting and then like how to institutionalize it in policy and practice. And then for some reason, this slide is not fully showing, but that's all right. And then we're just going to go over lessons learned. Oh, there we go. So yeah, like thoughtful expansion is kind of what we've kind of figured out. So I'll hand it over to Colleen to share about composting.
Yeah, thanks. So as Amber was saying, we have a distributed campus system. And so a lot of our composting right now is really operationally driven in our dining hall composting program and other Mason dining sites. So since that program was established in 2018, we've composted close to 2 million pounds of compostable material or diverted away from incineration. And so currently that are in industrial composting sites, which are sent to a commercial composting facility partner in Manassas, include all 4 of our residential dining halls on the Fairfax campus, a retail dining site, which is also started as a pilot site that I'll be speaking about a bit later. Some big belly solar stations as like drop-off sites on the Fairfax campus, and three kind of different pilot locations, both for paper towel composting and building level composting. And as Amber mentioned, we also have some experiential learning sites that have composting included. So our Innovation Food Forest, Potomac Heights Student Garden, and yeah, we use both in-house and contracted hauling. So our facilities and campus operations recycling team, who we really support, and they operationally drive composting on campus. They haul in-house along with compost crew. So key challenges, which probably are familiar to a lot of folks on the call, is definitely operational capacity. So just needing more space, people, infrastructure to make composting, university wide. Engagement and awareness. Amber also mentioned a lot of our student and university population commute to Mason's campuses, so 79% of the student population. And so it can be hard, especially with limited drop-off locations and kind of select pilot sites, to promote engagement and awareness with composting. And contamination, of course. I put some photos of the compostable plastic cups from one of our waste audits. So, bioplastics look pretty similar to traditional plastics. Food service ware contamination and single-use plastics are things that we're always trying to keep out of the waste stream. And I'll pass it along to Amber, back to Amber.
Okay. So basically for composting, thinking about those challenges, what really kickstarted, the expansion or the refinement of composting on our campus, was the single-use plastics reduction effort back in 2021, which led to our Buy Less, Buy Better initiative. So it was really not just a focus on diversion anymore. It was like bringing in the idea of waste reduction, like what comes to campus in the first place. So we developed an interdisciplinary task force. Mostly it was our office, our recycling manager, Colleen and I were on there, and then auxiliary services. And it was really key to have that task force, with business services basically being our co-leads on it, because it created these partners, this new level of partnership, where we had more access to contract conversations or things like that. But basically through this task force, we researched and implemented best practice. And this was all toward plastics reduction again. We supported leadership and then vendors and purchasers in this pivot away from single-use plastics. So we contacted over 750 purchasers at Mason alone, and then held 18 office hour sessions. Those again were very kind of pivotal to people going from, I don't want these new restrictions, to, oh wait, this isn't as bad as I thought, let me tell my office about it. So we actually found that those office hour sessions were really impactful on people's willingness to come on board with the composting changes or the single-use plastic reduction changes. So impacts on composting, we switched 80% of plus, probably 90% at this point, of our single-use plastic food service items to compostable food service ware. And, as many of you know, food service items are the number one single-use plastic on campus. So that was a big shift. It also led to the policy of only accepting BPI or CMA certified items. And this was after we, Colleen and I did a lot of review and basically were worried about the PFAS risk from non-BPI or CMA certified items, even though that they were compostable. If we're sending this to an industrial composter, we wanted it to be certified that it was at a lower PFAS risk. So we created a list, a reference list to help vendors on campus, and it was it was dynamic in terms of like you could click on plates or food prep on this list on the right here, and basically they could see the SKUs of different suppliers. And so that was helpful to them. I will say that keeping up or maintaining that type of list is not feasible for any institution, I think, because SKUs change, product categories change, things like that. So it's better. What we found is just requiring the certification, leaning on certification. So BPI or CMA, we just say if you don't see that on there, or if you want, our industrial composter has CMA certified items on their website. So they maintain that and we don't maintain that. So that was an important learning lesson for us. And then this initiative also generated funding for pilots and new test stations for composting stations. The other institutionalization in policy was contracts and standards. As I mentioned, we had more access through this task force to be on committees to look at contract and policy inclusion for sustainability in general. But for instance, in the dining contract, that included key pieces about compost, including hauling contracts and the BPI CMA certified requirement and things like that. With RFPs, I will say, I just wanted to highlight this, like points in the evaluation review criteria are maybe the most important part of being a part of the RFP process. Sustainability got its own section instead of being woven into other, like maybe management or things like that. Like we have specific sustainability points that are toward RFP review criteria. So in the statement of needs, in the alignment with the goals and certifications, those are all key, things that are pushing composting along in policy. We also, through contracts, now have performance metrics to meet for composting and other like green restaurant certification type of standards that we're looking for. And other ASHE standards that we're looking for. So those are now program standards instead of just, oh, I hope we can convince you to, do such and such. We also require data improvements. And as all of you know, probably like it can be hard to get food waste data. So that is a huge win. We have a new dining contract, and that's a 10-year contract. So as you can imagine, like getting it in the contracts is I think one of the most important things, and we're excited for that new partnership. So the zero waste Mason design standards is the other major institutionalization of this in policy. And this is more zero, fully zero waste recycling, diversion, but we developed 5 standards and 5 guidelines for the upcoming design manual. And that whole process was highly collaborative and iterative as well. As you can see, the label we created as one of the standards is picture-based labeling. And so the picture on the right there is one of the labels we created. For compost, I just wanted to highlight, even though we accept compostable serviceware, we did not put a picture of it anywhere on our label because we didn't want people to be confused. As Colleen mentioned, bioplastics can look a lot like plastics, and if people aren't being careful, they could throw a plastic cup in there if they brought it from off campus. Or we have had folks have supply chain issues, and so they may buy a plastic cup one month and the next month they're compliant with BPI. So we need to get that right before we can put it on the labeling. So that's just a caveat with that. So I'll hand it back to Colleen.
Yeah, and so one of the ways that we have sort of been kind of, like Amber was saying, informing and testing out different best practices has been through pilot initiatives. So there are 2 kind of like main ones that we've been really focused on in the last couple of years, which are our composting pilot at a Starbucks location on campus, so a retail dining site, and then our Better Bins preview, which installed sort of like the draft design standards, like stations in an academic building to try and figure out some procedures for collections and at a campus-facing location. And so some of the opportunities at the time were really expanding a student-led pilot. And I guess I'll skip ahead. But yeah, so basically, as I was saying, we installed zero waste stations to test out things that are now in like our design standards manual and guidelines. So bilingual bin labeling, restrictive lids, color coding, and standardized stream order. And so if a budget is a story we tell about the future, it's really great to have a defined pilot budget and to be able to promote composting that way through along with like partnering sites in Mason Dining. And so we did see improvement. So it was a 6-month pilot at Starbucks Northern Neck, and these were really great opportunities. So we were doing these on weekly basis, on a weekly basis to get students involved, as well as to identify what the common contaminants were that were like unique to that site, because going into it, no idea that like these specific pink like cleaning towels were making their way into compost most easily, and to be able to provide that continuous feedback and to get feedback and recommendations from the operational staff at the site and incorporate that as we went along was super helpful. So there was a 79% improvement in compost contamination over that 6-month period. And that is now a permanent composting site that is operating, but still requires continuing maintenance and troubleshooting, as it always will. And then Better Bins Preview was sort of built upon that's a successful pilot in some ways. So sort of now expanding the refined design standards for centralized stations and installing them building wide, so from bathrooms to hallways, and engaging with building occupants and operational staff at that site in a similar fashion, where we were tabling and hosting weekly office hours and using that time to really facilitate their collaboration and peer-to-peer education, and it was really helpful for buy-in. So some of the outcomes, we were awarded $230,000 from an internal grant fund at the university to expand the Big Belly Solar Initiative following the Starbucks Northern Neck pilot. And this was really fantastic for citing those at places of high generation, outlier places of super high generation or super low, and kind of bring our collections into an even place. We improved composting training in partnership and close collaboration with Mason Dining staff. So those kind of like best practices and like walkthroughs, creating a site map, things like that, we were able to kind of incorporate that in our relationship with Mason Dining and kind of train the trainer kind of opportunities, as well as just some basic and information that we about composting practices in new staff orientations. And then with facilities and campus operations recycling, established procedures for the first time for in-house compost hauling. So they collect from Starbucks. They incorporated the Spot following that, which is a plant-based dining hall on campus, and Catherine G. Johnson Hall, which was like the site for the Better Bins preview. Yeah, the installation of the bilingual bin labeling is currently happening across academic buildings on the Fairfax campus. And very quickly, lessons learned. So for us, a combined kind of strategy for hauling has been really effective. We were sort of able to experiment and develop in partnership with the recycling team what some in-house like hauling could look like with their really small team. So having the space to do that through the larger kind of like volume of like our dining hall composting program being hauled by compost crew was essential. So we could kind of add on campus facing access at those pilot sites. Yeah, partnerships are key. I mean, we're lucky to have a Convertus commercial facility really close to us and worked really closely. Previously, they were Free State Farms in developing the list of BPI and CMA certified items that Amber spoke about. So continuing to see where we're at with our compostable materials that are brought to their facilities has been super helpful. So having that communication, and then internally partnering with students at waste audits events, Weigh the Waste, their own PGF funded projects has been essential for identifying sites where we can make the sort of like pilot proposal as facilities. And then implementing standards has really reduced contamination. It's just standardizing things so our waste system is more legible to people. And then one thing that was interesting from Better Bins is we saw really great engagement from in-person tabling versus the virtual office hours, and direct email engagement and forming those relationships was also really helpful. It was definitely a lot of time commitment, but it was worth it to get sort of that real-time feedback and observational feedback from folks being in the space. And then very obvious, but like pilots don't end. We really chose sites based off of folks' feedback. So.
Yeah, no, I know, Sydney, we've gone over, but I just wanted to put this up as, the next steps. Mainly, with the DEQ proposal, I'm sure a lot of folks, the main question is always expansion, and do we have support for front of house expansion? We have a pretty good back of house operation going. It's cleaner, but with that front of house expansion is the DEQ opportunity, the opportunity to help with expanding infrastructure and things that would help. We mentioned a bunch of, and I just want to be, clear, like we mentioned a bunch of pilot sites that really did reduce contamination, but that infrastructure costs money. So it is, at a pilot stage at this point. Yeah. And so we're just trying to do best practices, co-location, bin labeling, things like that to improve where we can. But it really does take labor. It really does take infrastructure to get those numbers that we're looking for. I do want to mention that, partnership and stakeholder engagement is key, and that we're actually doing a joint session with UVA at the ASHE conference coming up this October, if folks are there, on zero waste standards development, if anyone wants to come. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to Amber and Colleen. And then with that, I will hand it over to our last speaker from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. If you want to make, oh, yeah, there you go.
We got it. Yep, perfect. All right, can everyone see and hear? Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Cindy, for inviting me to this. I will preface this by saying our program is much smaller than Richmond's and George Mason's, but we are super excited. 2024 was kind of where we started the program. And so I just want to preface that. So I'm Jennifer Dreyer. Also, I am an assistant research scientist at VIMS and also the curator of our VIMS invertebrate collection. So I also want to preface this by, so we don't really have a group or an organization that within our college that deals with composting. And so this is truly like a grassroots effort in terms of staff and volunteers. And so very different in scale in terms of Richmond and George Mason, but we're super excited about the results that we're getting. Just a quick overview of VIMS in general, just in comparison. So we have approximately 500 faculty, staff, and students. So the scale is very, very small. We're a small campus. We don't have any dining facilities. We have no residence halls. in comparison to the, the two talks we just heard about. There was a previous garden composting program here at VIMS, but it did fail. It was pre-COVID. It just didn't get a lot of traction. Essentially, people would bring in home compost, and then they were supposed to move that from one bin to the second bin to add like landscaping waste, and then the third bin in theory was supposed to be like compost to put in a garden space. In general, I don't think no one really wanted to be in charge of that, and so it kind of failed. But that was the reason that I got involved and was really interested in trying to compost at VIMS, because William and Mary does this, and it's unfortunate that William and Mary wasn't able to attend, but they have a really strong program. Currently, right now, they have 15 bins across their campus, and they do, it's almost like 250,000 pounds a year. And so they're really good at this. But I was driving my compost to William and Mary in order to drop it off because I did not want it to go to a landfill. And I was among other people who felt just as strongly about it. And so I was like, well, there's got to be a way we can get this here. And so through that, I worked and applied for a grant with William and Mary. They have a green fee grant basically that funds green initiatives. And so I thought, hey, why don't we try to get a program here? Realizing that, again, Nope is already handling the compost at William and Mary. And so we kind of worked with Nope and partnered with them to see if they'd be willing to come to VIMS to pick up our compost. And luckily they were willing to do that, which is fantastic. To shout out to Ryan and to Nope. So that began in 2024. And so the funding came through, but we really didn't start the program until July. So the first year of data is essentially going to be from basically July 1 of 2024, and we're just ending as of June 30th of 2025. And so just wanted to give you just kind of a highlight of the program in terms of how we operate it here on a relatively small scale, but thinking in the future of how to expand. So currently in communal spaces on campus, almost all of our buildings, which I say all, we have 8 buildings. We have communal kitchens. And so within those buildings, each floor in some cases has their own communal bucket. Some buildings only have 1 bucket. So it just depends, but there's 12 communal buckets on campus. And so we have volunteers, whether that's staff or graduate students who also participate. They pick up the compost once a week from the buckets. And you can see the buckets here. They're only 2 gallons because we didn't want them to be super heavy and that to be a limitation for volunteers. So they're relatively small. I will say in general, on any given week, they're probably half to sometimes full. And so I think it's a good volume. And I've always offered if they need more liners, then we can also pick up more often if we need to. But so far, once a week has been working. And so within our contract with Nope, we had 2 large bins that they would come pick up weekly. And so within that, we kind of developed some educational material that are posted with the buckets, and those are in the communal kitchens. And then VIMS itself, facilities have gone and added additional compost bins, and those are primarily for events, but we can talk about that in just a second. All right, so the main sources of the compost from VIMS, the VIMS garden waste, again, that's kind of where we started the program in terms of there just ended up being a huge need. So we have a VIMS garden. I don't actually know how many plots are. There may be 24 plots. It's a relatively small footprint, but again, all of that garden waste does accumulate. I already mentioned this, but the community members also, so whether you work at VIMS or affiliated with VIMS, again, every single community member has the ability to bring in compost from home. And that was kind of a driver of the program. Again, with no residence halls, I mean, that's kind of the main place and source of being able to create the compost. We have included VIMS landscaping waste. So we are a relatively small campus, but we can do this on a small scale. So Nope has been great about working with us including the landscape waste, as long as it's not like big sticks and stuff. We've been able to do that on a limited scale, given in the beginning we only had 2 bins that they would pick up weekly. And then our campus and we've talked to some of the other groups and have similarities where we are trying to move towards zero waste events. I will say it's that has been a really big push. And the more events that we host that are zero waste, the, the more it gets into the mindset. But having said that, there are times when we do have caterers, for example, who will come and bring plastic. In theory, there should be some, discussion before they even come that they don't need to do that, because all of our materials at VIMS for all of our events are compostable servingware, cups, all of that's compostable. So in theory, the sources of contamination on events come from either if the vendor brings it in and no one tells them, or if somebody was to bring any kind of plastic from outside of VIMS. And so we're really trying to make all of our campus events zero waste and as most efficiently as possible, but recognizing currently that that's not exactly 100%. And so in some of the pictures you can see we have these extra totes that are next to the garden space where extra landscaping or garden waste accumulates, and then we will add those to the 2 bins that get collected by NOPE as there is room to add that. So this ends up being one additional source that I'll highlight in a minute, ended up being a really big source and was really important to some of the individuals in the multi-species research group here at VIMS. And so this composting of research fish ended up being a really big priority and initiative. To shout out to Gina Ralph, I think she's on this call as well, but she really wanted to help spearhead this. And so we worked really hard to be able to do that. So the fish come from various VIMS fish monitoring surveys. And so a lot of times the fish are, they're not exposed to any chemicals or anything like that. They're either weighed and measured and then unfortunately then they're discarded. So a lot of times those fish would then go to a landfill because there's no other real possibility for that. And so in this particular year, we were able to essentially harvest all or keep all the fish that were collected and then put them through the NOPE stream, which was fantastic. The highest densities ended up being from February to May when the surveys are running. I will say it was a little challenging. We did have some initial complaints of smell, and that was at the garden location. And so we definitely had to pivot. And so that reaction was pretty strong. And so we kind of wanted to still be able to do the composting of the research fish, but move in a way that would not upset other people here at VIMS. So we ended up moving the bin, 2 of the bins. We only had 2 in the first year. We moved those 2 bins to a fisheries location, which also was closer to the people who were handling the fish, but then it ends up being further away from a building where no one would inadvertently walk by on their way to their office. And so that helped a lot. We also decided to kind of triage the way that we were handling the fish. And so now the fish are frozen or refrigerated, and then they're added to the bins on Friday before NOPE comes at noon. And so that has also cut down on a lot of the smell and a lot of the issue. So it definitely can be done. And we were really excited to be able to do that as one of our big initiatives in the first year. Okay, so having said all of that, like I said, NOPE has been absolutely fantastic. They have worked with us to make the fish composting come to be successful, whereas, we weren't sure in the beginning we were going to be able to do it. They have been super supportive about all of that. And so they come and pick up our compost every Friday. We get an impact report every month, so we can kind of track the progress of how we're doing. And then, of course, we have enrolled in their compost credit program. So for every ton of compost that you generate, then you get a 40-pound bag of composted dirt, which is the end product of all of the composting that NOPE generates. And so we're a part of that program as well. So I can't say enough how fantastic NOPE has been. And I know they have a great partnership with William & Mary, and it sounds like with Richmond as well. So that's amazing to hear. All right, so these are our numbers from year 1. Again, keep in mind that our institution is way smaller than these other, like Richmond and George Mason. So for year 1, our total was about 13,000 pounds approximately. And so you can see there the net pounds of CO2 saved and the miles driven by an average vehicle, which is amazing. I do want to highlight, though, from those totals, that the fish composting was approximately half of that total, which is huge. And so, of course, the months that we had the fish, we had additional compost, but there's no way to really subtract that out. But I would say in general, the fish weight eclipsed the weight of any other compost, because that's also a really slow time for the garden. May is starting to ramp up, but in general, February and March are relatively slow. So that is a really big component. And so while we did try to capture as much fish as we could, I would imagine that between other, other sources and other issues, we weren't able to get as all of the research fish, but we are definitely looking forward to trying to capture more of that as we go forward. So the William and Mary Greenfeed grant, we applied for an additional year, and so we got year 2 funding, and so we were able to purchase 2 additional bins. So now there's 4 total. So we kept 2 at the garden, and now we have 2 permanently at the fisheries building, which is fantastic for the fish research composting. We did purchase additional bins for events that wouldn't, so the event compost wouldn't go against the totals for or space for the other 2 locations. And we have been piloting a paper towel program where we are only in 1 building currently. And so facilities and housekeeping have been working with us to collect all of the paper towel waste from the restrooms. And Gina has been also amazing in that capacity. So she does the contamination audits essentially. And so far, luckily, there's been little contamination. And so we are really hopeful that that is something maybe we can expand as we go forward in terms of capturing all the paper towels waste that is on campus. And just a couple additional possibilities that we've talked about, expanding the fish or fisheries waste. So not only are there fish that are getting thrown out and going to landfills at VIMS just from the research collections, there's other organisms within the fisheries that we do surveys on that could also go that way. Oysters are a great example, or even crabs. In general, not the oyster shell, but the oyster tissue, or blue crabs, for example. So that would be something we would like to incorporate if possible. We have considered maybe working with local restaurants, and maybe from the starting point, it would be just 1 or 2 to help. And I say local, like within 5-minute drive to collect food waste from their restaurant that could contribute to our program. We have considered maybe a possible public drop off, but currently that's not feasible because we're so staff limited, but also then there's the high contamination potential. So we're not sure how that's going to go, but it's definitely something we're considering. And with that consideration, because we're already having VIMS community members bring their compost from home. And of course, the downside is what even like Georgia Mason had mentioned in terms of all of these kinds of initiatives is we're limited by staff. And I say staff, but it's mostly volunteers at this point. There is a little bit of infrastructure that we have from VIMS facilities. But in general, not much of their staff time goes to this currently. VIMS has a sustainability committee. I am part of that committee, as well as other people who help and volunteer with this program. But in general, currently, we're limited by staff and volunteers to be able to do more initiatives. So with that, I will close and just say that we are super excited how year 1 went, and we're looking forward to possible expansions in year 2.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's such a cool program, and I'm really glad that we got to be able to share it here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the